Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Dawson. Welcome to Leader Talk. This show is proudly brought to you by Brainiact. Each week we are meeting with incredible leaders from around the world to discuss all things leadership and business insights. Each person coming on this talk show has given up their valuable time for one very clear purpose: to give back to small and medium business owners. Many of us will agree that the ability of leaders to communicate with their teams is key to their success. But at the same time, leader communication needs to be clear to ensure it overcomes any language or cultural barriers. Today, my co-host, CEO of Peerlight, Gus Arianto, and I are fortunate to chat to our guest speaker, Charles Brewer, Group Chief Executive Officer at Pos Malaysia. Charles has an extraordinary amount of experience in the industry, having led teams in different continents across Europe, Asia, Africa, and North America. As a direct consequence of his international endeavours, Charles has developed a unique ability to adapt to different environments and cultures. Charles is here today to provide his insights about managing teams when cultural and language barriers exist and how to remain a strong and inspirational leader. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you, Natalie, and I'll forgive you getting my title wrong. Don't worry about it. I'll let you off that small nose. I'm joking. It's lovely to see you. Great to see you. How are things in Australia? Good? Everything good?
Yes, things are good. Yes. We Fantastic. Are all good in Australia. How about over on your end?
Fantastic. Malaysia is always great. Great place. I just had a great Malaysian breakfast, which always starts my day off well, which Gus knows all about this. For those of your listeners who are not so experienced with Malaysia, they talk about Malaysia being truly Asia, and the food in Malaysia is just outstanding. For a discussion another day, but come on over. It's great. Yeah.
Well, actually, Charles, we do ask our guests two fun questions, and your first question is actually food related. So I'll ask you, what is your favorite meal to cook and why?
So as you can tell, I'm a bit of a foodie myself. So I love my food, which is a good thing, especially as I said, based on where I am. So if my wife was here, she would laugh at the question. My wife is Malaysian. She's fantastic, and she would laugh at the question because when I was sort of chasing her and trying to persuade her to even have a date with me, let alone get married to me, but to have a date with me, I was cooking things left, right, and centre because I do love cooking. And then ever since she said yes, I'm not so sure I cooked since. Apart from a barbecue, I love a barbecue, so that's my domain. But to eat, like I said earlier, I'd probably go with the spicier versions of Malaysian food, so Indian. Indonesian, Bahasa type spicier food. I love spicy.
Oh, sounds fantastic. And what about you've worked across all continents, as I've mentioned. What is your favorite place of all the places you've even visited, not even necessarily worked?
Yeah, so I normally say people refer to me as, but I think it's I refer to me as. I like to call myself the international man of mystery. So as you mentioned, I've now had the opportunity, the amazing opportunity. If you'd asked me this when I was growing up, I would never have believed it. But I've had the opportunity now. So I think I've been to about 112 countries and lived in all continents and. Had some really amazing. My children, who are still quite young, I swear to goodness, I will remind them this until the day I die. That they were so lucky. They've had a view out of their bedroom window looking at Table Mountain. They've had a view out of their bedroom looking at Times Square. They've had a view out of their bedroom window looking at the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. They've had some unbelievable views. None of which I think has any relevance for them at the moment, but hopefully in later life it will. But to your question, I get asked that all the time. Where's my favorite place? And so I take a bit of a Fifth Amendment because I'll offend somebody if I don't say that they're all fantastic. But I think it somewhat depends on your stage in life. So when I was younger, we lived in New York, and so sort of just as our kids were born, we lived right in the center of New York, just off Columbus Circle. And New York is just a melting pot of diversity, and there's so much to do. And we walked everywhere, so we loved living in New York. Absolutely loved living in New York. And that was fantastic. And then when I said we have family now, and our kids are sort of growing up, so we lived in Cape Town, Africa, and to give children the opportunity to live such an outdoor life, like Australia, by the way, I think is something very, very special. In the UK, that's not common. People hide away inside because it's cold and wet. But to live in a country where it's very warm and there's animals everywhere, whales going past, dolphins going that way, sharks, you name it. That's a pretty cool thing. So I must admit, I really loved living in Cape Town with Table Mountain as a backdrop. That was probably one of my personal favourites. But everywhere I lived has been good. It's just different degrees of good. They're all nice. And of course, Malaysia is my second home, so I love Malaysia.
Sounds amazing, doesn't it, Gus? It makes you want to travel again.
Exactly, 131 countries, and your passport will become a historical passport. That's
That's for sure. And Charles, look, we did research on you before. You came on this show, and you really have an incredible. I mean, there's so much about you. I couldn't even summarize it in the intro. I couldn't even get the title correct, so I do apologize for that. But if you could tell everyone listening more about yourself, so they can understand when we start talking about the cultural side of things, and language barriers and all that. Let us know who is Charles, and a bit about.
Yeah, sure. So English by birth. So we won't talk about the Ashes today. We'll keep that one for another day. I was thinking about it earlier that for all English listeners and viewers like me, we live in that sort of perpetual state of hope, whether it be cricket, rugby, football, tennis, whatever else. And that hope, in this case, in the Ashes, lasted one ball, which is really fantastic. So I won't talk about the Ashes today. But anyway, English by birth. So I grew up in the UK, but moved around a fair bit. So I guess my wife refers to us as modern day gypsies, and I think that was sort of in my DNA from day one. My father was an airline pilot, so we moved around a fair bit, even as children. So got fairly used to that, and maybe that's where the love of that comes from. I don't know, but anyway, to the point. So I started in the UK, joined DHL as a very young, slimmer, demi-wave, wham earing, Frankie Goes to Hollywood Relax T-shirt on. This is a true story in the interview, actually. But anyway, joined DHL when I was about 19, 20 years old, and didn't know anything about logistics. And I was asked in the interview by a lady by the name of Alison Brett, who was the head of recruitment for DHL UK. So DHL was a very young company in those days, and a very new company. And she still works for DHL. She still reminds me of this story very regularly. So I went to the interview in shorts, in a Frankie Goes to Hollywood Relax T-shirt, in flip-flops, I think you call them something else down in Australia, with an earring, with a demi-wave, and thought I looked pretty cool. And I parked my Mini 1875 GT Mini in the CEO spot in front of the building. And the lift, I walked in, and the guy that worked behind the counter or reception, unfortunately he's died, but his name is Fred. He looked at me and he said, can I help you? I said, yeah, I'm here for an interview. And he looked me up and down and he just laughed. Anyway, the lift opened and Alison came out, and she looked me up and down and laughed. And we went upstairs to this small room, had the interview, and she asked me, so why do you want to join DHL? And I gave her 3 answers, 2 of which I shall keep to myself because they were very honest, to do with partying and playing sport. But anyway, the third one was, because I want to go overseas. I want to work internationally. And in those days, the internet wasn't around. So if you wanted to see the Taj Mahal or the Burj Khalifa, or which wasn't there then, or anything you wanted to see, you physically had to go and see it. So I had this sort of desire to want to go international. And here I am, I don't know, 35, 37 years later, and have done that. So to your point, I started in the UK. I then came here to Malaysia. It was my first country that I came to work. Then from Malaysia, I went to the Philippines. From the Philippines, I came back to Malaysia. From Malaysia, I went to India. From India, I went to the US. From US, I went to Africa. From Africa, I went to Dubai. From Dubai, I went to Singapore. Singapore, I went to Canada. And Canada, I came back to Malaysia. So been around the world a bit. And in that time, when I looked after Africa, I think I had 39 countries I looked after. In Southeast Asia, obviously, when I ran DHL e-commerce for a while and had the half of the world. So it's been really, really, I mean, again, honestly, Natalie, if you'd asked me this when I was a a cheeky 20-year-old, and I'm a cheeky 57-year-old now, I don't think I could have written the script in terms of what I've been able to see, who I've been able to meet, the opportunities I've had, seeing gorillas in Rwanda. I mean, it's been an amazing experience, really amazing. I'm very fortunate. I count myself very lucky.
Yeah. I have to ask this: you parked in the CEO's car park. Did he know or she know at the time that you?
I didn't tell you the whole story just to keep it short, but I'll try and give you a succinct version.
I'd love to know.
So the reason I ended up at DHL was a friend of mine who I played rugby with kept on asking me week after week after week, come and work for DHL, fill out this form. And anyway, I was too busy doing other things to even bother. And eventually one weekend he came to the rugby club and he actually had completed the application form for me and just said, just sign here. What I didn't know at the time is I couldn't work out why he was so keen, apart from he's a friend, why he was so keen for me to do it. And the reason was he got paid a £250 bounty for every person he brought into DHL. So that's why he was so keen. But anyway, to the point, to your question, after I had this interview in my shorts, relaxed t-shirt, part of the car and thing, I was living in Chiswick in London. I went back home and in the afternoon, the phone rang, the real phone, not your mobile phone, the real with the curly wire. And he said to me, hey, did you come for an interview today? I said, yeah. He said, is it true that you came in shorts and a t-shirt, earring, demi-wave, flip-flop? Yeah. And he says, is it true that you told them the only reason you wanted to join DHL was because you heard they partied hard and you wanted to be part of the party? And I said, yep. And he said, and lastly, did you park in the CEO's car park? I said, yep. And I said, why are you asking? He said, the whole organization is talking about this cheeky, flippant individual that came into DHL and did et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so it's a very humorous way that I joined DHL. But the point, I tell this story very, very often to lots of people. On induction talks and orientation talks, and I tell it for a very specific reason, which is, and I firmly believe this, and sort of moving towards the leadership discussion, is that regardless of situation, hold on to what's really true about yourself. So look, I don't have the long hair anymore and I don't have the earring, but I haven't really fundamentally changed. I think you have to absolutely be a little bit of a chameleon and adjust to your environment and adjust to whoever your manager is or your boss is or your board is or whatever else. So absolutely, you need to moderate and change and bend and curve depending. But your true values, what you personally believe in, I think don't let go of. And so I'm not so sure I'm fundamentally different to that 20, a little bit heavier, I've got to be honest, but I'm not so sure I'm fundamentally different to that Charles Brewer, that 20-year-old Charles Brewer that rocked up and parked. I'd park in the car park tomorrow if I had the opportunity to make the point that I think you shouldn't have I don't have a parking space here. I refuse to have one. So I park with everybody else.
What a brilliant story and what a great introduction.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And look, still kind of staying on that track, you're talking about the values and all that's important to you. We really wanted to lead into this leadership discussion with understanding what leadership actually means to you. We'd love for you to share that with us.
I think it changes with time. So when you're sort of starting out as a manager, well, when I was first a manager, what it meant to me was having a Mercedes car, and what it meant to me was telling my father that I finally made it. So I think it means different things at different times. I think over the years, I've learned that what a leader really is about is creating shining eyes in your employees, helping your team to be successful as best you can. We were chatting just before we started. I was having a meeting at 7 o'clock this morning, and I was talking to my HR lead, and we were discussing a variety of things. And I said, look, fundamentally, I can give you all of my opinions, but that's not really the job. My job is to help you to be as successful as I possibly can help you to be. And I think that's what a leader, again, as I said, I think I've learned that over the years, that fundamentally my role is to try to excite, energize, and help the 10 or 8 people that work for me directly to be as successful as they can be, so that they do the same with their people. And so I think in terms of what I believe leadership, that's probably where I would sit. The only other comment I'd make is, and there's lots, Monday to Friday, there's lots of other things I have to do. But the other key one, I think, is if you think about a dragon boat, and everybody, the people, the power of the guys or girls rowing it, but the leader is the drummer. And what the leader does is he sets or she sets the beat of the organization. And I think that's really important to understand as well, that, and again, we were talking about this morning, when you're facing a very significant cultural transformation, which in Pos Malaysia we are, the biggest driver of that culture is what I do. The biggest driver of that culture is what I do. And what I mean by that is, if you have a poster on your window saying, one of the ones that I hate the most, which says customer service is an attitude, not a department, which all of those posters, if you have them in, anybody listening who has that in their office, please feel free to take them down and just blame me, because it's irrelevant. It's the behavior that drives the culture. So if you have that poster and you say customer service is an attitude, but then when a customer calls the CEO, he avoids it and gives it to somebody else, you are killing the culture that you're suggesting is you're trying to create. So that I would suggest, Natalie, the other part of my life is that drumbeat, making sure that I get that drumbeat in sync with where the organization is. When it's ready to move fast, we move fast. When we want to slow down, we go slow. That the behaviors that I demonstrate are aligned with what I want Post to be in terms of a culture. And if it starts with me. So if we get that right, I get 8 more people right. Like those 8 get 10 more right. You end up creating an amazing organization. So I would say those 2 pieces for me are probably the most important.
Charles, I have a question for you. It's funny you put an example of a dragon boat. Just to put aside my organizational coach, I have a coach that's been assisting me for the last 2 decades, and she's actually she was world champion of a dragon boat, part of the world champion of dragon boat. She came from Argentina, I think, from Argentina. And when you talk about the drumbeat, I love this story. I actually write it down. The leader's responsibility to set the beat and the rhythm of the drive and the culture to move forward. Now, when you do that, a dragon boat is not too big, so you can see the amount of 12 people. I don't know how many people, but in the organization like Malaysia Post, for example, or many or large organization that you lead, you can see the sweat and the face. How do you create that without burning some of your team when, say, you want to move forward? You want to move forward, but in reality of a organization that you lead, you will not be able to see the face. How do you? Is there any tricks to keep your momentum without having any blind spot?
Well, three comments, and before I give you the 3 comments, the first one I would say is that there's no perfect recipe, there's no perfect answer, and I get it wrong as many times as I get it right, maybe sometimes more wrong than right, and certainly, again, we don't know each other, but if you talk to my team either here or when I was with DHL or with Canada Post, they'll tell you that I go 100 miles an hour pretty much at everything. So I like the dragon boat to go pretty fast. It's just one of my, it's a truism of my life, personally and professionally. Ask my wife, it frustrates the hell out of her. She gets very stressed by my ability to want to go at a certain speed and be somewhere in a certain time and so on and so forth. So it's kind of in my DNA. So hard to fundamentally change it. But again, time in job and experience and maturity teaches you a little bit about checking in on a regular basis. And I'm going to give you a couple of stories. Well, I'll give you one story and then one example. So one is, when I was in Africa, for example, we had 39 countries that we were looking after, and it was also facing its turnaround challenges, but to different degrees. But anyway, to the point, we were going, as always, pretty fast, and banging the drum and going at this speed. And I was sitting with my operations head one day, and he was telling me that he was a really good guy, very good at giving me good, honest feedback. And he was telling me that he said, "Hey, Charles, do you think everybody is on the dragon boat or everybody was on the boat at the same pace? And I said, well, yeah, of course. And he said, yeah, we just need to check in occasionally. And it was a really good lesson. It was a good life lesson that, you know, to your point about blind spots, and if you're familiar with the Joe Horry window, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So now I've learned, in fact, again, only in the last 24 hours or so, we were talking about that as a team here, that, you know, you've got to tell me if the boat is going too fast, or you think it's not ready to go at the speed we want to go at, or if the rest of the team are not there. So I think you can, you know, again, depending on your relationship with your team, you can get that feedback directly from your direct reports. And certainly from my perspective, because I know, you know, what makes me great is sometimes also what makes me a little bit weak. I know that because I want to go that fast, I need to just ask every now and then, hey, are we still okay? Is everybody okay? Everybody in the same place? And again, over time, and it's quite hard in Asia, because culturally in Asia, it is not normal for an Asian employee to say to a Guido or Matsale, hey, I don't agree. It's quite challenging to get that relationship right, where people feel comfortable to say, just need to take a pause. Can we go back over why we're doing this? You know, can we just answer, you know, so doing that sort of check-in in Asia is actually a little bit more challenging than perhaps it is in, say, Canada or the US or in the UK, etc. So that's one. Secondly, I'm a really, really firm believer, and have been my whole life, that you will learn more from one day in the field with your couriers or your sort team or your operations team or your sales team or with customers. You'll learn more in that 1 hour in the field than one day in the boardroom. So I spend a significant amount of my time, you know, more than 50% of my time is out in the field. And that's a great way for getting a really good pulse of where the business is. As I said, you learn real fast. You sit in a van with a courier, in my case, or on a bike with a postman, and you spend the day walking in their shoes. And you in your head, you think you've got everything mapped out. The whole thing is heading in the right direction. And then the postman says, hey, but I only earn this much, and my family, I've got to do this, and I've got to do that, and my kids have got to go to school. You know, it's a leveler, a very fast leveler to saying, okay, we haven't got this quite right. So I think it's a combination of both. So to answer your question, and again, just purely from a personal perspective, having a really good relationship with your team, where they feel comfortable to just give you feedback, I think is one, to make sure that the boat's going in the right speed. And secondly, go out in the field, go to the lowest level you possibly can. Go and park in the CEO's space and ask the courier or the ops agent, hey, how are you feeling? And you'll learn fast whether, you know, the boat is moving at the right pace, or is everybody on the right boat, or do they even know the boat exists? So it's a really good way of getting instant feedback.
Charles, one more. You just say something, and I'm actually taking the question. I'm sure Natalie have a good question, but you mentioned something that not many people actually mention. To be frankly honest, it was introduced to me recently too, in the hard way by my coach, Graciela, that I mentioned before. What makes you great can also make you weak.
Oh, for sure.
This is not mentioned by you. You don't tend to sit in many articles. You don't sit in many conversation, because if you're great, you're great. But you just said what makes you great. It carry a lot of weakness in it as well. Can you elaborate for the audience?
Yeah.
This is something really, really good.
Very easily. And again, you or your listeners may be familiar with, there's a mapping process where you map your styles, and it comes out with red, yellow, green, or blue. And, you know, people are either very red, they're very EQ, or they're very IQ, you know. And something like 1 or 2% of the world's population are equitably strong in all 4 quadrants. And I'm one of those people which you think, oh, that's great, but they also tend to be schizophrenic, and they also tend to be mass murderers. Most mass murderers come in that middle quadrant where they're equally. So it's not necessarily a good thing. I learned it's not necessarily a good thing. But anyway, to the point, and the reason I mentioned that is that that sort of slightly schizophrenic behavior is that I'm very acutely aware of some of the things that I'm very good at, also have negative connotations. Let me give you a real life example. So as Natalie introduced, so another thing that I get called is the chief energy officer. And I do it because, to the earlier point, when I was a courier, and when I remember this, like it was yesterday, when I first joined DHL, and I was working in the back of the warehouse. Every morning, the then CEO would do his walk around, and he was a great leader. We're still friends today, so this is 30 odd years ago, and he met me the first time, and he said, hi, who? I said, Charles, and so we spent a few minutes, and maybe a minute and a half talking, but he lit my eyes up. In that minute and a half, he had a choice, either to make me excited, depressed, or neutral, and he excited me. His comments, his interest, it made me feel like I want to work for this person. But to the point, two things. One is he remembered my name. So he would come and do it every morning. And there were probably then 5,000 people working in the UK. And he remembered my name. That's a unique ability to be able to say, hey, Charles, how are you? The next day, and the next day, and the day after that. So to the point, I took that as a really amazing lesson. And to this day, I still apply it. And I apply it in the sense that when you meet somebody, whether it be a courier or a customer service agent or a salesperson or a customer or your wife-to-be, you have 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 1.5 minutes to excite and engage and energize. And for that person, it's probably the most important moment of their day, of their week, and in some cases of their life. I was doing an interview like this just recently with somebody from the US, and when he rang me to say, hey, I want to do an interview, and I knew the name and I knew he worked for DHL, and he said, do you know, I remember when you came to New York on such and such a date, it was a rainy day, blah, 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 and I remembered it. I remembered the evening that I came. This is like 10 years ago. I remember going there. And he said, you walk around, you shook everybody's hand, you said hello, you asked them this, you asked them that, you asked me about. He said, I've never, ever forgotten that time. So to the point, I really believe that you have that opportunity to energize somebody, and that could be the only moment they ever meet you. So it's a really powerful thing. So that's something, if you ask me what's one of your strengths, I would put that up as one of my strengths. So that chief energy officer, that ability to energize 20,000 people in the pursuit of our journey, is something I'm very, very good at. But that energy has a flip side. The flip side is that not everybody wants to be energized every single moment of the day. So when I bounce into your office, or like today, or when I go home at night and I see my kids go, wow, they're not necessarily on the same page. So energy, that positive energy, can have a flip side. And the other flip side is that, like everybody in life, not often, but everybody, I have bad days, or bad minutes, or bad half hours. And when I'm having a bad minute, because I'm so high the rest of the time, people spot it immediately. It's so obvious that I'm not so 100%. So everything has a flip side. Every positive strength in a leader, whether it be, the empathy, authenticity, energy, drive, strategy, passion, results, focus, whatever competency you want to look at, and leadership behavior, it has a negative. If you're really results driven for a board and for shareholders, that's like fantastic. But sometimes it has negative connotations because you don't see the EQ side of your business. If you're incredibly good at EQ, it's like I'm the most empathetic leader ever, but you never deliver results. So everything has a flip. Everything has a flip side. So yeah, I think that's.
Thank you.
I think to your point, Gus, the key thing is, as leaders or as individuals, just know what you're good at and what you're not so good at. If you know what you're really good at, what's the flip side of the not so good? And you just have to be very aware of it, so that, for example, day before yesterday, a very junior member of staff wrote to me and said, hey, love that you're here, love the social media stuff, blah, blah, blah. Can I have a chat to you about my career? And this is a little bit going back to my comment about the customer service. This is an attitude, not a department. If my value set or my poster is that I'm very engaging and listen and blah, 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 if I didn't respond to that particular person and say, sure, let's jump on a call and have a quick chat, you are killing the culture that you're trying to create. So you have to be very consistent with whatever you're good at, and also be aware of what you're not so good at. So sure enough, we had a conversation, and hopefully I energized him a little bit. But you have to be very consistent, is the key.
Fantastic.
What an interesting way to look at it. Thank you for that, Charles. And before we move on to the next thing, I've got a note here. You mentioned, you go 100 miles an hour, 50% of the time on the field. I'm sure others are out there are questioning how you actually manage your time when you're leading such a large and complex organization.
Yeah. That's a great question. So, and again, I've learned over years to be a little bit more transparent on this than I was perhaps beforehand. I'm brilliant, to say myself. I'm brilliant first thing in the morning. I'm useless at 5 p.m. at night. So I'm spent. I'm done. By about 3:30, 4 o'clock, my ability to concentrate and give you 100% is significantly diminished. So I deliberately, and as I said, over the years, I've learned to be more transparent. My team know if they want to have a really energizing conversation about HRD or organizational design or about sales incentives or about customer, whatever it may be, if they want to have a really quality 1 hour or half hour or do it in the morning. Let's do it over a cup of coffee. I'm ready. I've done a bit of exercise. I'm pumped. I'm ready to go. 5 o'clock at night, forget it. 5 o'clock at night, I can barely remember people's names. So let's not do it then. It won't work. It won't work so well. So yes.
Sorry. So we do this at the right time because it's 8 a.m. Where you are right now.
Yeah, no. So, today and this time is a great time. So as you can tell, I'm ready and fired up and ready to go. But yeah, so I manage my assistant manages my diary in such a way that all the really key stuff we do first thing in the morning. It's just a way that and from I think a lot of people, we operate better first thing in the morning. And then the sort of more mundane stuff like, Charles, can you go and have a coffee with the head of legal and just say hi? I do that later in the afternoon. I don't do it first thing in the morning. So
yeah, I can relate to that.
Sorry, Nat, there's one other comment, which is, again, I think really, really worth sharing. And again, just talking this with somebody yesterday, which is, I'm not sure if you're so familiar with a phrase, they term it as the burnout zone. Everybody has different triggers that pushes them into the burnout zone. And, everybody goes there. You can't avoid it. I'm sure I won't ask you, Natalie, with Jared or whatever else. There are things that he can say or do that send you there in a split second. I made the fatal mistake with my wife, God bless her, who works like a Trojan with my two fantastic kids. 2 or 3 days ago, I'm making a really stupid remark, which as soon as I said it, you have that person on your shoulder. As soon as I said it, I thought, why did you say that? Why did you say that? And sure enough, it sent us straight to the burnout zone, and so I got no dinner, things thrown at me, all you just done. But anyway, and in work, it's true too, and again, like I said, I was talking to my HR head about this morning, that, when we're in the meeting room, we need to recognize with each other when any one of us is heading towards the burnout zone. Because if you're in the burnout zone, you can't possibly perform. You don't behave rationally. This is when table thumping happens, eyes roll and the whites come out and coffees go across the room and bad decisions are made. And again, to the credit of the gentleman I mentioned earlier in South Africa, where we had this unbelievably good relationship where he was very honest. So we had a code word that if one of us was getting close to that burnout zone by behavior, sort of starting to get agitated, throwing frustrated comments, sarcastic remarks, all the sort of traits of that burnout zone. If it was coming, he or I would say the burnout zone. And that was our opportunity to say, let's grab a coffee. And I would go out the building, walk around the building, get some fresh air, come back in and just take a 15, 20 minutes pause, and you go again. So to your question, Natalie, I think the other point I'd make is that for all of us, the triggers that send us to that burnout zone are different. So again, going back to the example I just gave you, I'm not very good in the afternoon. If one of my managers comes and sees me and says, "Hey, can we sit down and discuss the 2022 salary increase at 5:33 at night when I'm going out with my family for dinner for the first time in 3 weeks?" That's just not a good time to do it. So know what are your burnout zones, what's the triggers that send you there, and equally importantly, you need to, sorry, just somebody's walked in my office, so my apologies. Equally, that would send me to the burnout zone. So equally importantly, if you know what pushes you there, also know how to get out of it. And I'll tell you just one lovely story. So when I was in South Africa and sort of first learned about this, I mean, I knew the burnout zone existed, but I didn't know what some of those drivers were. And more importantly, I didn't know how to recover. I used to drive a Jeep. And in those days, my way to recover and set myself in the right tone would be just park the Jeep in front of the sea, turn on some decent music, and just have 10 minutes in the right area, in the right head. For others it's shopping online, for others it's cycling, for others it's running, but for me it's music. So take that pregnant pause, reset, and you go again, and that helps tremendously.
Yeah. Look, thank you. I mean, you can see what an incredible leader you really are. Just the honesty that you are providing to everyone and the listeners. Just thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to switch it over to the business insight side, because that, a lot of people, we want to ask you these questions. With all this experience you've had, we have lots of questions to ask. So, you are clearly an experienced leader. You've managed organizations in different countries and employees with different cultural backgrounds. We'd love to know what do you think are the top 3 things you've learned from this experience?
I'll tell you the first one. Everybody is different. So I think there's 3 jump off the page. The first one is everybody's different. And so what I mean by that is, and it's a very easy thing to say. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. So when I, again, use Africa as an example, 39 countries, to fly from Cape Town, where I live, to Dakar in Senegal was a 19-hour flight. It's a huge continent, yeah? But when people talk about Africa, they talk about Africa. They don't talk about Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire or Ethiopia or Uganda or Rwanda or Kenya or South Africa or Botswana. Every single one of those countries are enormous in themselves, and every single one is so unique. And within that country, every city is unique. If you go to Kenya, the north of Kenya to the south of Kenya, from the west of Kenya to the east of Kenya, it is like poles apart. And I think, like many people, I grew up thinking, saying that statement, but not really believing it. And so I think, number one, I've learned that you really have to appreciate and respect that there is significant differences. And like I said earlier on, I've never once contradicted my personal values, but I have absolutely morphed and changed and flowed with the different environment. I'll give you one wonderful story to illustrate this. So when I first came to Malaysia, straight out of the UK, coming to Malaysia, I was blown away by the work ethic of the Malaysian team that I was leading. And they worked much longer hours. They were so committed. And I was sitting in a board meeting or a management meeting about 2 or 3 weeks in. And a very, very good friend of mine, still a very good friend of mine today, who was on the management team, called Gerard Santa Maria. So he's Portuguese Malaysian. He was sitting next to me and he was asking me, so what have you learned in the last 2 or 3 weeks? And so this was my first experience internationally. Yeah? And so I was telling him, unbelievable work ethic, it's amazing. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I come in, I'm an early starter, like I said. So I said, I come in about 7, sometimes 6:45, 6:30. And I said to him, my team, all of them, bar 1 or 2, were there before I even got there. And he said, okay, right. And I said, yeah. And then I go home because I was new in the business. I was going home at sort of 6 p.m. at night, sometimes a little bit later. And I said, and they're still there. at the end of the night. I said, it's unbelievable. I said, in the UK where I came from, if you stood by the exit doors at 5:30, you'll get trampled by the rush of people coming out. And I said, so your work ethic is incredible. And he smiled, and he was sort of smiling a bit like you are now, Natalie. He was smiling and staring at me and just laughing. And I said, well, what am I missing? What am I missing? He said, you just don't understand, do you? I said, nope. And he said, so just to replay what you just told me. So you come in at 6:30 and they're there before you. I said, yep. And he said, and you leave at sort of 6 p.m. at night and they're there after. I said, yep. I said, it's amazing. He said, you're a Gwailo, Matsale, a foreigner, and you're the head of the department. Yeah. So in Asian culture, which is incredibly hierarchical, incredibly structural, they want to be in before you and leave after you, because they would see it as a sign of weakness to be there, as in if you're late. So they're doing it because, so to the point, and I can repeat this story on 12 other learnings over my life. To the point, you know, I didn't realize that I was creating that situation and impacting people's lives. You know, people married, got children, whatever else, because of what I was doing. You know, it's comical now, but at the time, I suspect it wasn't so comical for the 50 or so people that were working in that department for me. But to the point, you know, really, to your question, you have to understand that your presence and your behavior and your styles are interpreted and have an impact depending on what the culture is of the country. And in Africa, there was very, very similar things. So I think first and foremost that everybody's different. Secondly, and Natalie, this is one of the ones I love the most, and it has so many implications, is that I didn't understand the value of that difference. So one, there is a difference. So first of all, there's a difference. Recognize that. Yeah. And in Australia, which is a melting pot, you probably sometimes forget this, but you should appreciate that you have this diversity. Yeah? And that's the second one, is that the value of that diversity. And everybody, you know, when you talk about diversity, people think about sex, race, religion, but it's not just that. It's diversity of thought. That's the most important. Diversity of thought. And again, until I'd sort of done what I've done over the years and moved around, I really didn't appreciate that was so important. And so it's very, very relevant for where I am now, where we have less than 20% of our workforce are female, 99.9% of employees are Malay. There's never been an Englishman in charge of Pos Malaysia ever. So that sort of awareness of the beauty of diversity and how that's going to have an unbelievably wonderful impact on what we build here is born out of that experience over the last 30 odd years. I wouldn't have, if I'd come from the UK to here, I wouldn't have appreciated that. So I would say that's the second one, is really, really understanding the value of that diversity. And I guess the third thing I say about sort of what have I learned from having all those different stuff is just the beautiful part of the world. It's the world is beautiful. And I'll give you just one story to that effect, and I could tell you hundreds and hundreds. But, and again, like I said right at the start, I've just been so fortunate. But when I went to Rwanda for the first time, and as I'm sure you know, and your listeners will know, they went through, you know, a just horrific story through the genocide. But anyway, when I went there, I was very lucky that, you know, I had somebody who went through that, who spent 3 days with me, telling me the story, and I'm quite an emotional person. It really touched me. But to the point, we went to, one of the things we did is we were sort of immersing ourselves in the history of Rwanda and understanding how it had shaped the country. And it's a beautiful country now. It's an amazing country. Anybody who gets the chance to go to Rwanda, to walk up the mountains and see the mountain gorillas, do it. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever done in my life. But anyway, to the point, they took us to this village where the wives of the husbands that were killed, they've created this village where they can work and get themselves back on their feet. Many of these women were raped multiple times. They have scars, and both emotionally and physical scars. But anyway, so it's a you know, really touching experience. But to the point, I was invited into this house of this one lady who, and their house, their whole contents, their whole world was 2 chairs, a table, and this house. And this young man, young boy, sorry, not man, young boy who I met, the son, his name was Charlie by coincidence. And he had the biggest smile on his face, biggest smile. His sole possessions was one flip-flop, a pair of shorts, and a t-shirt. His whole life was one flip-flop, a pair of shorts, and a t-shirt. And when I went home to my family that weekend, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. When I went home to my family that weekend and I looked at my children's worth, it really made me think. So I think the third piece to your question is just grounding my experience and life around whatever happens in your day. Nothing can be as bad as that young boy's life. Nothing. And he was happy. He was really, really happy. You know, so yeah, so I would say that.
I think, Charles, you know, one thing that beautiful listening to you, and in the perspective of a leader, you have this strong ability to see the beauty of a story because you are very open. You know, you say the world is beautiful means that your acceptance of situation in different country are larger than many people, because you know, I'm trying to put an example. If your first position is UK is beautiful, then you will never like Malaysian food in the first hit.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know whether that's accurate.
No, it's true. I know what you're saying. So I'll give you a parallel. My brother's family moved to India, and I love India, by the way. India's a great country, you know. But I could understand why people would say I don't like it, because it's a mess. It's all over. It's very unstructured. You know, the light switch works one day, doesn't work the next day. There's cows walking down the street. I was in a meeting. This is again true story. I was in a meeting in Delhi one day, and we were having a really serious business meeting. And I was sitting there, and we'd had a few drinks the night before. So we were sitting there, and it was a very dark room, and we were sitting there, and I looked up, and I saw a trunk come through the window and take an apple and go back out the window again. And I was sitting there going, and I looked at my colleagues, and nobody else had seen it. So I thought, wow, I really must have had quite a few drinks last night. And I waited, and I didn't say anything. I just waited, and about 2.5 minutes later, this long trunk came in the window again, down, and took in fruit and went back out again. And so I said, can I just ask everybody, is there an elephant outside the window? And everybody went, what on earth are you talking about? So we went over and opened the curtains, and sure enough, there was this Indian elephant standing at the window, and because the window was open, he put his trunk in to get some fruit out of the fruit bowl, and off he went. But you either love that sort of hecticness, and this dirty, India's a dirty place at times, you know, you either love that and embrace it, and you say, I see what's great about it, and I see what's so colorful about it, and I see all the diversity, or you think, I just can't handle this. I want to go back to square walls with light switches that work, doctors that work, and everything else. And my DNA is that I quite like it. I like that. The roughness, I suppose, of life. Yeah.
Charles, you need to write a book.
Yeah, I think so.
I actually have thought about it, but I don't even know where to start. But
You have
you start with a lead word.
you just have so much, like your stories, they're so relatable. You know what you said, Gus, there's one thing saying something, you know, what are the traits of a leader or something, but you bring it to life and make us understand it, you know, in such a way. It's such a gift.
Thank you very much. If you ever like to be my ghostwriter, Natalie, I'm happy for you to take that role. I can tell you before you said it.
I would be honored, Charles. I'd be honored. But I do want to ask, leaders in different countries, not many of us have the experience of actually working with leaders from different countries. Do they all have the same leadership traits? Do different countries have different leaders, or is a leader regardless of whether it's whether leaders in Africa, Europe?
Massively different. Massively different. And I'll give you just a couple of examples. So I worked for DHL for 35 years, which is a German company. So it's operated by Deutsche Post. Yeah. So Deutsche Post bought DHL, DHL Xpress, who I work for, and a great company, great. You know, the most international company in the world. But anyway, to the point. So as you can tell, I'm probably, as I mentioned earlier, I hit all 4 quadrants, but I have a bias towards EQ. I have a bias towards EQ, which is not right or wrong. I just have a bias towards EQ. But if you wander into the boardroom in Germany and you tell a story about the elephant and how lovely life is, they couldn't care less. Just, can you show me the numbers? What are the numbers? What's the so their mindset is IQ. Their mindset is IQ. That doesn't mean they have no EQ, but they have a strong bias towards IQ. So I don't tell football stories, don't tell elephant stories, don't tell stories about Rwanda. I tell stories about how we're going to improve the bottom line. Yeah? So that's just their bias. But if you go to Africa, you go to Nigeria, for example, which is, again, a beautiful country, worst traffic in the world. Anybody on this, everywhere I've lived in the world, one of the first questions somebody will tell you is, the traffic here is terrible. I said, until you've been to Lagos and taken 5 hours. I went to Lagos once to go to a conference, and to get to the conference, which was only 3 miles, I had to take 3 taxis and a boat to get there because the traffic was so bad. But anyway, to the point, if you go to Nigeria, and you go into a meeting there and you start with numbers, they'll look at you like you're something wrong. They want to start with music and dance. So it's a very EQ environment, and that's how you win over that audience, is through music and dance. So I think, and Canada is different again. Canada's all about equality and diversity. So they start with health and safety, diversity. So like I said earlier, I haven't fundamentally changed my value sets anywhere that I've worked, but you moderate, and the leadership style, to your question, Natalie, is very, very different wherever you operate in the world. Like I said earlier, there's no two that are the same. Yeah.
So Charles, we're representing small business, and the idea of Leader Talk is to give great insight about this. Many small business, by opportunity, might or maybe they already have employed cross-cultural background employees. For example, I'm a mechanic. I have a mechanics shop, and Natalie is my receptionist. So we are totally different. Well, come from Indonesia, we start a little bit lighter than Western countries. We are not really an early morning person, and yet Natalie come from Croatia. She start at 6 o'clock and start standing in front of my mechanic shop at 6 a.m. When I arrive at 8, she's frustrated, thinking that I need to be there. Now, as a leader, how do we learn this? You've been in 130 countries, so you understand there is a dancing before the meeting or numbers before the dancing, right? There's two. But me, as a small business with one receptionist, I don't have many experience in different countries. What can you teach me so I can understand that Natalie want to be working at 6 a.m. when I want to start at 9 a.m.
Well, I think 3 things. So, and again, we have 1.7 million SMEs and MSMEs here in Malaysia, and I'm sure, like Australia, for Australia to come out of COVID, we need those SMEs and MSMEs to be successful. So first and foremost, and to any of your listeners, if I can ever help with any questions that they have on running their business, just shout. I'm happy to help you get back on your feet. I'm sure the last couple of years have been particularly tough. So that's number one. I think to your question, three things. Listen. Yeah, use your ears. A very good friend of mine who's Australian, actually, a phrase that everybody knows. You have 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use them proportionally. I think that's really, really a good bit of advice, which is listen. And when I say listen, use all your senses. Because to your example, you'll know whether Natalie's happy or unhappy just by body language, behavior, words, commentary, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's really, really important to listen. Second one is ask the questions. Don't be. I think people sometimes see weakness in for the leader to ask the most junior person, what can I do to be different? What can I do to be better? This morning, I asked my head of HRD, what am I doing that's making you happy or unhappy? Because, as I said earlier, culture is a function of behavior. So and Newton's law of physics, to every action is an equal opposite reaction. So if I get on this call and operate in a certain way, you operate in a certain way. So you're smiling now, Gus, and you're smiling because I'm smiling. Yeah. So it's reciprocal. So I think, you know, as a leader of an SME or an MSME or large company, don't be afraid to ask any one of your employees, what am I doing that's helping or hindering? What am I doing that's making you happy or unhappy? Because there will be things that you're doing that are making your employees unhappy. Guarantee it. When no one's perfect, I do it every single day. That I'll say something, a throwaway remark, 5:33 in the afternoon when I tell my boss or one of my managers I don't want to go through their salary adjustments for 2022. There are things that I do that put people in a burnout zone. Yeah. So ask your employees, what am I doing that's making you happy or unhappy? And you'll learn very, very quickly. And I think the third thing is that, you know, and again, I'm English by heart and very proud of my country, but I'm not proud when they make statements like, you need to adjust to my culture. That's rubbish. Yeah. The world is a melting pot. The world is eclectic. The world is, as I said earlier, it's a beautiful thing. And we should, as much as we can, acclimate to the different environments, not try and acclimate to one. So in the case of Malaysia, you know, it's not them that need to acclimate to me, it's me that needs to acclimate to them. So I need to adjust not my core values but my behaviors to where I operate. So if you've got 15 different nationalities working for you, celebrate every single one of their holidays, celebrate every food festival, celebrate every single one, because that's what makes the world great. You know, I don't believe in trying to make everybody conform to how the UK wants them to conform, or you can't wear a tudong to school, or you whatever it is. It's just nonsense. Yeah, I think it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. What a great answer. Look, I'm looking at the time, Charles, but I have one more thing. And this was a question that I mentioned to you earlier, and I said that I'll ask you this one on air because I don't have your answer yet. But, you know, there's a lot of businesses, there's people out there listening, perhaps they're starting locally in Australia, wherever in the world they're from, and they want to go global. So there's obviously language barriers. And I think your answer to this may actually help them, because I'm curious myself to know, how do you actually lead a team or, you know, people when there are these language barriers?
So
difficult.
so two parts. On the going global thing, and this is statistically proven. So it's proven that if you want to expand your business, you know, take Australia, for example, you want to expand your business from Australia, go to New Zealand. It's the most obvious market to go to next. So go to both geographically those countries that are nearest to you, but also to those languages that are most nearest to you. So if you're an Australian organization, SME, MSME, and you want to hit into Indonesia, it's quite tough because language, culture, you don't know what people like, what they don't like. And again, Gus knows this, you know, operating in different parts of Asia, they're so different in terms of what they want and how they operate and how they need. So it wouldn't be the most successful to hit the hardest market in the world, or the Middle East, or whatever it may be. So pick the ones where you can quickly align. You know, if your website's in English, no point in going to Indonesia. Go to New Zealand first. And then when you've worked that one out, then have your website in 3 languages, go to those markets. So I think you can, that's statistically proven as a sensible global strategy for any SME, MSME. To your question around sort of language, speak slowly. I know it's really, really tough. And I struggle with this because, as you, like Gus was asking earlier, what's the flip of the good? If you're high energy, which I am, it also means you, and I always have my whole life, you speak at 300 miles an hour. Not so good if no one speaks English, you know. So I really try to speak slowly. That's number one. Number two, purely from a leadership perspective, and even here in Malaysia, you know, so English is taught, but it's not as widely spoken as perhaps one would think. But they do get energy. They get that. So when I go, and I just spent the last 3 months out in all of the 13 states across Malaysia and meeting as many of the 20,000 employees and customers that I can. And if you asked one of those employees that doesn't necessarily speak English, did you understand what he said? They'd probably say no, but I get his general idea is to be happy, energized, excited, keep our customers happy, you know. So I think some things are universally translatable, that thumbs up means thumbs up, big smile means being happy. So you just have to amplify the things that work. And of course, occasionally I get a translator to translate some of the key messages that need to be translated. But dance with them. I danced in 10 of the 13 states. I'm not a very good dancer, but that's how you connect. You don't need language for that. I drank some really weird rice wine in a few places that I never want to drink again. I ate some very strange foods that I perhaps wouldn't want to eat again, but I also ate some very good food. So you cross territories in different ways, and that would be the way I would suggest it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Gus, we're out of time. So Gus, I'm going to actually hand it over to you to wrap up.
Thank you. And Charles, on behalf of Leader Talk and Brainiac, thank you so much for donating your insight. I can listen to you for 5 hours. Your example is so easy to understand, and simplicity sounds easy, but unless you experience, you can actually demonstrate simplicity. Thank you so much. So this is what I take, that I think our audience will appreciate. Regardless the situation, hold on to your authenticity. Your true value and what you believe have to be your base foundation. That's without any say. Multiple times you say it's not mean that you are closed, but you still need to be open. What's leadership for you? Help. This I really love. Helping your team to be successful, creating a shining star. There's nothing about leading. You are the top, you are the boss, you are the number one, you are the happy. You just want to wake up, rock up, and make others a shining star. Well done. Leaders set the beat and the rhythm. I don't think after this, I will forget this thing. I will start doing this even in my organization, because that's really easy to understand. Leaders set the beat and the rhythm of the drive and the culture to move forward. Remember, what makes us great carry a lot of negativity that can make others weak. High energy might need to have a lot of filters to make sure that other people do not get burned out. What is your top 3 learning managing in different countries? Appreciate and respect that everyone is different. Your behavior and your style have different meanings to different countries. The world is beautiful. And if you start with that, you can access the world because you open up instead of closing in. Charles, thank you so much. Very insightful, very, very strong leader. Malaysia Post will be successful under your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Gus. I appreciate that. And thank you, Natalie. And as I said earlier on, I'm sure you can pass on my contact details. If I can ever help anybody, feel free to drop me a line. No issue at all.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Charles. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. For more information on Leader Talk and for some great resources to help your business grow, check out brainiac.com.au. Thanks, everyone. Bye.